Good morning. It's nice to see you all here today. My name is Marcia Brooker. I have been a member of this congregation since the early 90s. And some of you don't know me because I took a 3 year sabbatical and I came back last year. So I'm still getting my way back into the congregation. Um, I've been here in many roles. Um, I've done a lot of projects. I've been in a lot of committees. I've been on the board. I've just done all of that stuff. And this celebration of having some of the ministers come back has been really, really very, very thrilling for me because I came here when Barbara Peskin was the minister here, and we're going to see Daniel today, and I helped to get Daniel settled here in one way or the other. So it's really kind of cool. The thing that I liked most the first time I came to this church, once I found it, because it was way off in the in the in the woods in Ridgefield, um, I saw people, and I never saw a church like this in my life. I saw people hugging each other. I saw people talking to children. I heard a lot of chatter, and it was like, well, what's going on here, you know? And it turned out that it was in Gathering Sunday. And so I was treated to this beautiful ritual that has been going on for a long time. And it was just like biting into a truffle because I had been unaffiliated with any kind of a religious institution for about 12 years. And I was beginning to feel that I needed something. And it was actually a Forum on Faith column in the Danbury News Times that Barbara Peskin had written that got me here. And like a rubber band, I keep coming back. So that's my story. Take it or leave it, but that's what I'm going to say. So, um, if you have your phone turned on, would you be sure that it's turned off? The Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Danbury has been gathering together for 200 years. And as we work to build a more just world, we respectfully acknowledge that our physical building is on the traditional land of the Paugussett people. I'm so glad that you are able to join us today. And people at home, we're glad to have you with us also, because you all, whether we can see you or not, are essential part of this celebration today. Whether today is your first day or your thousandth in our midst, in person or online, we are stronger because you are all with us. If you're new to our community and joining us online, we invite you to introduce yourself and where you are connecting from in the chat box as you are comfortable. At the conclusion of today's service, you will have the chance to participate in a breakout session. This is mostly for the people online. You will be able to get some closer connections and some deeper check-ins there. If you are new and here in person, please fill out a visitor card at the table in the hall where you got your order of service before you leave today. And consider staying for a few minutes after the service for coffee and conversation. We are one people of many beliefs, many origins, sexualities, and genders. We are all growing and learning, all loved just as you are, and you are welcome here. I have a few announcements, and I left my bulletin down there, so excuse me just a minute. One thing you never forget to do is how to do a welcome, I'll tell you. There's going to be a community dinner, a monthly community dinner that will offer a variety of soups, some salad, and simple desserts. Beverages will also be available, and every effort will be made to have all food ingredients listed. and allergies accommodated. Generous UCD cooks will once again be preparing the food. Bring yourself and your appetite to the Fellowship Hall gathering. It will begin at 5:45 and will be available, soup will be available at 6. There is no date on here, but I do believe that it is the 9th, which is this coming Wednesday. After dinner, there will be into programming at 6:40 with a choice of discussion, an activity, or a chance to sing with the choir. If you have not previously helped with setup or cleanup, please consider signing up to do that in order to spread the work around. Wow, there are a lot of, come on, you can come in. I feel like a celebrity with all these people waiting at the door to come in. On Sunday, November 13th, a week from today, the Reverend Dr. Kathleen Rudolph will lead the service on the gift of humility. And you can read about that in your order of service. It's on the top of the second page. Sunday Connection for newcomers are invited to join Reverend Kathleen after the service on Sunday, November 13th, next week, in the Fellowship Hall for an informal get acquainted session. Let us know what brought you here, what questions you have about Unitarian Universalism or this congregation. The November 13th Sunday's Connections will be an in-person only session. If attending an in-person session is difficult, please contact membership co-chair Heather Smith about setting up a Zoom connection session in the near future. Thank you very much. I am so glad that I've been able to say my welcome, and I hope to get to know some of the faces that I don't know soon. Thanks a lot.
This is the time in our service where we take a few moments to greet each other, whether you are here in person in the Fellowship Hall or you are on Zoom. And we are looking forward to greeting Reverend Daniel O'Connell in a few moments. But for now, let's take a moment to say hello to each other and introduce ourselves. All right, so we will transition now into our hymn of welcome, which is number 114 in your gray hymnal, Forward Through the Ages.
Forward through the ages in unbroken line, the faithful spirits have the call divine, gifts in differing measure, hearts of one accord, manifold the service, one the sure reward. Forward through the ages in unbroken line, the faithful spirits at the call divine. Wider grows the vision, realm of love and light. For it we must labor till our faith is sight. Prophets have proclaimed it, martyrs testified, poets sung its glory, one living hope. Move we on together to the shining goal. Forward through the ages in unbroken line. Move the faithful spirits at the call divine.
Now, I invite you to join us in our chalice lighting affirmation. You can find the words either in your bulletin or on the screen. Love is the spirit of this congregation, and justice is its light. This is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek and speak the truth in love, to help one another and celebrate life.
Okay, let's join together in the children's affirmation. The words are going to be on the screen or in the bulletin. We are Unitarian Universalists. We are people with open minds, loving hearts, and helping hands. We care for the earth and each other. I have a story for you today about figuring out what to do. I bet that's something that a lot of us can relate to, a situation where we have to figure out what to do. This is a true story. It comes from a church that I know well because it is the very first church I ever worked for. I got a job there as director of religious education about a year after I got out of college. They are bigger than this congregation, but not by too much. And here's the important thing. The congregation had to figure out what to do to live out their faith, just like we do, to make their beliefs come alive in their community when a need came up. Here's how the story begins. In a time years before I arrived, in the middle of the winter, when the weather was very cold, unusually cold, with temperatures sitting near freezing every day, the sexton, that means somebody who's a paid caretaker of the church's property, got a call from a neighbor. The neighbor said, "Do you know that there's someone living on your church's property?" Now, if you were trying to picture that here, you'd probably have to imagine that somebody was parking their car in the parking lot at night and sleeping inside of it. Sometimes people do that because a congregation's parking lot can feel pretty safe. But this church was different because they had woods behind their building. So the sexton decided to go out walking. Like if you picture just woods back here, just thick wooded area. He decided to go out walking deep into the woods, and inside the woods, he found a tent. And in the tent, he found a young woman with 2 young children, a baby and a toddler. And he asked them how they ended up there. And the young woman explained all the reasons that she and her children didn't have a home, and all of the reasons that they felt like the church woods were a safer place for them than the other places available. Now the sexton and the church had some choices. They needed to decide what to do. What are some of the things you think they considered? Yes.
How they would feed them.
How they would feed them. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I bet that was one of the things that they considered. What else?
Invite them into the building so they'd be warm.
Can we invite them into the building so they can be warm? Yes. Any others?
Put them in touch with a social worker.
Put them in touch with somebody who can help, right?
Help them find affordable housing.
And help them find some housing. I think all of those things were involved. I know that within the hour, they had the mom and her babies in the building and all of her stuff from her tent in the building, and they were figuring out what to do next. But one of the things that this situation did was make the congregation very uncomfortable. Because even if they helped this one young woman find housing or get housed, they're still living in a community where a mom and her babies might feel like their only option is to hide out in the woods. And they wondered, what else can we do so that no mamas and no babies have to stay even a single night in a tent in the woods when it's freezing outside? Even doing nothing would be doing something. They needed to figure out what to do. So what are some things you think they considered at this point? Find out if there are other friends in the woods. Yes, absolutely. What else? Okay, so continue helping this woman find work and daycare. Yes, ask the woman what else she has tried, what else she's looked into. Spread the word about being able to help. Yes, ways that people can help. Yes, absolutely. Have somebody partner with her in the congregation to get paperwork done. All right, very good. Yes, these are all great ideas. And I will tell you that what they did was pretty big. They discovered that part of the reason that mamas and babies were not in the shelter in that city is because there were no shelters in that city that were for families, only shelters for people who were on their own. And it so happened that there was a pretty big home for sale behind the woods, behind the church, and they decided to raise funds to buy it. And there they made a shelter for families. They called it Out of the Woods. Now, when I came along, the shelter wasn't just a shelter anymore. The church was creating a nonprofit to run the shelter and help with the other ministries that they had started, because just like the call had come from the neighbor, hello, we have somebody living on your property, they were getting other calls about other ways that people needed help in the community. So they started, for example, an emergency food pantry for people with allergies and dietary restrictions. And they ran it out of their church kitchen. And there at the kitchen table, they learned about people not having a way to get to the grocery store where there were fruits and vegetables, which the pantry didn't have, or not having ways to get to work. People were asking for help. The congregation listened and started a program to get people bus passes and gas cards. They worked with utility companies so they could help pay when someone didn't have the electricity, water, or gas they needed to cook, shower, or clean. But the house that they had this shelter in was starting to fall apart, and it couldn't be fixed. And they wondered, would they need to close the shelter, or would they buy a new house? The house across the street from the church was for sale, so they thought, should we buy that house? And then something happened that changed everything. They got a call, perfect timing, I just got a notification. They got a call, this was before the days of cell phones, from another church, a minister in another church, and that minister said, look, we have some people who have been staying on our property in tents, and they are asking to stay here. Can you help? So this church, the church that I worked for, had a question. I wonder if you can guess what that question was. Can we get together? Yes, absolutely. This was a congregation that had a history of partnering. In fact, when the the shelters that were for individuals would close or were to have all of their beds full during the winter, they would cooperate and have people housed in the churches on a rotating basis over the winter. Their question was, why aren't these people going to the shelters? So they decided to go find out. They went and talked to the people who were asking to stay at that other church. I wonder what you can imagine them hearing, what reasons people were staying in the shelters. Weren't staying there, yeah. Not safe. The shelters weren't feeling safe, absolutely. What else? Diseases. Okay, so not healthy, not necessarily healthy, or they weren't necessarily healthy. Sure, absolutely. Right. Although this congregation had opened up a family shelter by this point. These were individuals. They empty out during the day, absolutely.
They couldn't do a lot of the things that they would have done if they weren't in a public, health.
They couldn't do a lot of the things that they would do if they had the freedom. And that's exactly the kinds of things that they were bringing up. They found out that there were many reasons that people didn't stay in shelters. And one of the big ones is that no human being wants to feel like somebody else's project, like a forever receiver of services. People want to be able to make their own decisions. People want freedom of choices. People want to be caretakers of community, not just the cared for. Now, this church that I worked for needed to figure out what to do. So again, what are some things you think they considered?
Working with the other church to get something, maybe to get money to either buy another house or fix up the one they had.
Okay, so working on another shelter option. Okay. Independent living. How do we get people into living independently? Absolutely.
Make the shelter a cooperative so that people there are actually working.
How could we make the shelter a cooperative so that people can work together and work? Mm-hmm. Well, here's what they did. They asked these people who were staying in the tents, how can we help? They asked. And this led to an incredible journey of helping people set up something called a tent city on their shelter property, and helping the community figure out for itself how to safely care for the community and keep people well. And they kept having to figure out what to do with one question after another. For instance, a neighbor complained that they didn't like seeing all of the tents, even though they were set back from the road. So they had to figure out what to do about that, and they built a fence. I bet you can imagine the many kinds of things that happened over the years that followed, and the many ways they kept needing to ask, what should we do? What calls are we getting? Not just on the phone, but from our deepest beliefs as Unitarian Universalists. And eventually, what grew from that call so long ago was supporting a community in building a community of housing, not just tents, but little homes where people could be for as long as they needed. Of course, this church's call isn't every church's call, but every church comes across moments when the question is the same. What should we do? What calls are we getting? Not just on the phone, but from our deepest beliefs. Let's sing This Little Light of Mine together.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
This is the time in the service when we acknowledge the milestones in our lives, the things that may be joyful and celebratory, but also the things that might be weighing us down or with which we might be struggling. And we'll do this in two ways. We'll start with a round of silent milestones and then move to spoken. So if you are here in the fellowship hall, I'll invite you to come up and place a stone in the bowl if you would like. And if you are at home, I encourage you to find a way to mark your own silent milestone if you wish. And then we'll move on to the spoken ones.
This is called The Summer Day, and it's by Mary Oliver. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, and who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last, and too soon? Let us hold on to this next question for a few moments. Tell me, what is it that you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? And now I invite you, as you are willing and able, to rise and sing our hymn of reflection, number 108, My Life Flows On in Endless Song.
My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, though far off hymn that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? What through the tempest round me roars, I know the truth it liveth. What though the darkness round me close, songs in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since love prevails in heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing? When tyrants tremble as they hear the bell of freedom ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? To prison cell and dungeon vile, our thoughts to them are winging, when friends by shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing?
This is the time in our service where we gratefully receive offerings to support this congregation. And whether you are here in the fellowship hall and the plate passes through the rows, or you are online and would like to give electronically or mail a check, that information should be appearing on your screen shortly. If you are here for the first time, and as a way of welcoming you, we invite you to let the plate pass you by, because your presence is your gift to us on this day.
Thank you for that music. It's wonderful. And thank you, Reverend Sierra Marie, for the story for all ages. What a way to wrap that up. I mean, you can ask the same question in more than one way, right? So the question we're focusing on today is, what are you doing here? So with those campers, you could say, what are you doing here? Why are you in our backyard? Or you could say, what are you doing here? Mary Oliver asks us this question too in her own way. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? That kind of gives pause, doesn't it? In the Bible, the future apostle Paul is on the road to Damascus and gets blinded by a light for 3 days. The voice of Jesus speaks to him in this story and his companions. Paul, what are you doing here? And Paul goes through a one-way door. His life, our lives, are changed forever. This happens over and over again. My grandfather was a featherweight boxer in Chicago with a promising career. And after one Friday night fight, it came to him that he won that match way too quickly. He felt like he'd almost killed his opponent. What am I doing here? He got so mad with himself that instead of taking the train home, he walked in a rainstorm without his coat, and he came down with pneumonia and ended up in the hospital deathly ill. And he got worse, and he seemed to be on his deathbed, and a friend told him to pray. So he prayed and said that if God saved him, he would start to go to church. And he got a little better, but not much. Next, he said if God made him healthy again, he'd enter the ministry. And he got well. But much to everyone's surprise, he did end up entering the ministry, and he'd heard a call in a sickbed. Later, after I was born, my grandfather heard the call from Dr. King to white ministers to come down to Selma and march. And he did. And his life and my family's life were changed forever. In my own life, a call came when I was sitting around at a UU church conference. There was a lull in the conversation, and I asked myself, what am I doing here? And I heard a voice say, you can do this, meaning the ordained ministry. And in that moment, I knew two things with extreme clarity. I knew a freedom I had never known before, the freedom to radically change my life. And the second thing I knew was fear. Fear that my life would be changed forever, which, of course, it was. Now, sometimes, as with biblical figures like Paul, answering a call is almost instantaneous. The call is given, there's no mistaking the call. It is heard, and it is answered with that person's life work. For some of us, a call has been there a long time. We delay answering it. It's as if you're house sitting in an unfamiliar house. Long after you fall asleep in some far off room, a phone begins to ring and ring. But you keep on sleeping. You become so accustomed to the ringing that you weave the sound into your dream. Why doesn't somebody answer that call, you wonder? Sometimes we ignore a call. Other times we hide from it. A minister phoned the home of a recent visitor to his church, and a voice on the other end of the phone answered with, "Hello?" The minister said, "Who's this?" The whisperer said, "Jimmy." The minister said, "How old are you, Jimmy?" "5." "Well, Jimmy, can I speak to your mom?" "She's busy." "Well, then, Jimmy, can I please speak to your other mom?" "She's busy." "Jimmy, it sounds noisy there. Are there any other adults in your home?" "Firemen." "Can I speak to one of the firemen?" "They're busy." "Jimmy, who else is there?" "Who else is there? I hear noises." "The police." "Okay, well, Jimmy, can you put one of the police on the phone?" "They're all busy." "Jimmy, what are they all busy doing?" "They're busy looking for me." And like Jimmy, some of us are hiding even though we know we are being called. It's easy to hide from a call to service, the call to wholeness, or the call to answer the only question that matters: what is the meaning of your one wild and precious life? If the story of Jimmy is of hiding from being called, there is a story of running away from the call. And that way lies trouble, as we learn from the story of Jonah in the Hebrew Bible. And to refresh your memory about Jonah, in case you grew up Unitarian Universalist when I did and didn't hear many Bible stories back then, Jonah hears a call from God. Jonah runs away. In fact, he runs in the opposite direction of where God called him to go. He hops on a boat. God gets angry. "Jonah, what are you doing here?" So Jonah does what you or I would have done. He jumps in the ocean. God sends a big fish after him, and after 3 days and nights, the fish spits Jonah back onto the shore, and Jonah's story continues. Now, I read a short story a while back about Jonah's story from the fish's point of view. And think about it, this fish does not have the same range of choices that Jonah has. As Bibi, the fish, put it, "For me, swimming away wasn't an option. This was God who meant business." And after 3 days and 3 nights, Bibi finally gets to spit up Jonah on the shore, and then Bibi goes to visit his mother to try and make sense of his experience. And his mother tells him that when she was pregnant with Bibi and his 300 brothers and sisters, a boy named Jonah caught her and threw her back in the ocean. She didn't know whether or not it was the same Jonah. And then she tells him to go up to the surface and look at the waves. And he does so. When he gets back, she asks him what he saw. "Just waves," he replies. "Where were they going?" He says he doesn't know where they were going. His mother says, "It's the same with the things we do. That boy couldn't know what would happen if he threw me back. And he couldn't know that you would someday save the life of a man called Jonah. And I don't suppose you can know the result of saving this Jonah or where it will lead. You can only be sure that it will lead somewhere and that it was the right thing to do." So Bibi, the big-eyed tuna, is called, and he has no choice but to respond to the call. But Jonah had a choice. My grandfather had a choice. You and I have a choice every day to answer the question, what are we doing here? How to discern a call. How to tell if it's real. As one of my teachers put it, you know you're on a fruitful spiritual path when you find some fruit. Okay. How do you as a congregation, how do you continue to find your spiritual path? In some religions, there's a supreme religious leader who it is said has direct access to God. Pretty straightforward. But in liberal churches like this one, there are different paths. This is a church where for many years there's been a progressive spirit. And to quote from uudanbury.org, we are an open religious community that welcomes the diversity of people, ideas, and beliefs. We celebrate together that which is good in life and offer comfort and care in times of need. With others, we work to create a just society and a sustainable earth. We stand as a beacon for independent thought and encourage lifelong spiritual and intellectual exploration. And now you transition again from your second century to your third. And still the question Love asks, what are you doing here? Every great once in a while, it's not just a person who hears a call, but a whole people. And then they make history. Consider all the civil rights movements in our country. All the civil rights movements around the world and throughout history. Some that are going on right now. People heard a call. There was a growing concern, a growing feeling that something must be done. They heard the call. And instead of being rolled over by it, they helped make history. Have you read about the amazing things people from all over the world are doing to support Ukrainians? They've sent over $2 million to help Ukrainian Airbnb hosts. And these people have no intention of going over there right now. They just want to send money and help. Creativity and love can find a way, despite dark feelings of helplessness. One of the amazing stories of World War II is the story of Bulgarian Christians responding to Love's question, what are you doing here? And the story is told by Yad Vashem, the World Holocaust Remembrance Center. Now, Bulgaria started out the war as an ally nation to Germany, and the persecution of Jews began immediately. By early 1943, arrest and deportation began. Almost all of the 11,343 Jews in the Bulgarian-occupied areas were sent to the Treblinka extermination camp in German-occupied Poland to be killed. Now, the Jews within the pre-war borders of Bulgaria knew they were next. There were some 23,000 of them in the countryside, and they were to be sent to the country's largest and capital city, Sofia. And then there were an additional 25,000 Jews in the capital at that time, so 48,000 Jews. In early March 1943, the Bulgarian government decided to hand over the first group of 800 Jews from Sofia to the Germans. All the preparations had been made. The cattle cars were waiting in the capital's train station. Suddenly, at the end of the long boulevard leading to the train station, appeared the figure of Metropolitan Stefan. 6.5 feet tall to start with, but if you know anything about those Orthodox priests, they wear that hat on top of their heads that make them a foot taller. So he must have looked 7.5 feet tall. Huge white beard hanging over his white robe, and they said he walked with a stride that would amaze you. And he walked down to where the Jews were imprisoned, and behind Metropolitan Stefan were hundreds of Christians, and they surrounded the stockade, and the guards had their guns out. They were not expecting this. And then Metropolitan Stefan went up to the guards who shouldered their guns, and he pushed one soldier's gun aside, and he marched into the midst of the Jews, and they surrounded him. They knew they were about to be shipped to a death camp. And he raised his hands. It grew quieter. And he told everyone he had spoken to King Boris and that the deportation had been suspended. That same month, 1,500 Jews were scheduled to be deported from the Bulgarian city of Plovdiv, but Bishop Kirill succeeded in halting that. The bishops managed to get Jews evacuated to the countryside instead of being deported to Poland, and the deportation was postponed again and again until it was finally canceled with the Allied invasion of Italy and eventually the end of the war. Imagine that. All those religious people and their leaders answering Love's call, what are you doing? What are you doing here on this railway station platform? I don't suppose Metropolitan Stefan and those Bulgarian churchgoers from some 80 years ago could have known in advance what was going to happen. I mean, how could they? They could not know whether or not they could really help save almost 50,000 people from the death camps. All those people. Maybe more than one of them was named Jonah. They could only be sure that what they were doing was the right thing to do, and that it could lead to new life somewhere. When love asks us, what are you doing here? How shall you as a congregation answer that question? Some 200 years ago, Universalists founded a church in Danbury, and through the generations, through 2 centuries of sermons, singing, music, social action, raising children, through all of that, we arrive at the miracle that is today. And what great thing could be next? Our UU history is full of examples of lay leaders and a minister discerning the next call, the next project, the next big idea for their congregation. But why? You may have already had a long week. You got things going on in your life. You have problems to consider. You have things that wake you up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Why volunteer in a church? I mean, really, what's in it for you? And I'll tell you what the answer is. What's in it for you is more meaning and purpose in your life. There's a certain sense of satisfaction that only comes when you are fulfilling a call, a purpose. As the Irish playwright George Bernard Shaw put it, where is the true joy in life? It is not in being a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. No, the true joy in life is being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one, and being thoroughly worn out before you are thrown onto the scrap heap. People often don't feel at peace, true peace, unless they feel they are living for something bigger than themselves. Answering a call helps you live a life of meaning and purpose. You can learn new things. You can feel the Spirit. You can listen for a call. Don't be 5-year-old Jimmy and hide, and avoid the temptation to run away from a call like Jonah did. Instead, I urge you to listen. Listen for a call, and maybe have been there for quite a while, and answer it with your true self. Answer with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. And if you don't know a call, or maybe if you're trying to discern a new one, then maybe kneel in the grass. Be idle. Feel blessed. Stroll through the fields and pay as much attention to something small as you can. You can start small. There's a website, uudanbury.org, that's got all kinds of things, and there you will find a doorway to make a difference. We cannot know what will happen when we answer a call. And we don't know if we will someday save the life of a man called Jonah, or even an Afghan or Ukrainian refugee from a bus station, or a transgender family coming from Texas, or people camping out in the woods. We can't know if we will someday help people like that out unless we listen for that call and follow up on it. And I don't suppose you can know the result of saving someone. And I don't suppose you can know the result of saving yourself or where it will lead. You can only be sure that it will lead somewhere and that it is the right thing to do. So may it be, and amen.
In a moment, we'll extinguish the chalice, but I want to extend a word of thanks to Reverend Daniel for answering our call to come and be with us again this morning. It's been a pleasure. So please join me in the words that are printed in your order of service or which are on the screen to extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of community. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world until we are together again. And now I invite you to join in our hymn of celebration, which is number 1057 in the Teal hymnal, Go Lifted Up.
Oh, lift it up, love bless your way. Moonlight, starlight, guide your journey into peace and the brightness of day. Go lift it up, love bless your way. Moonlight, starlight, guide your journey into peace and the brightness of day.
And now, beyond the power of any spoken word, may the Spirit of love do such persuasive work in our hearts that we may testify by our lives of its presence, its power, and its peace. Go now in peace, be at peace, and amen.